Let me ask you something. Have you ever met someone who just clicked with you right away? They were kind, magnetic, full of warmth. You felt seen in a way you hadn't in a long time, maybe ever. It felt like fate, like you finally found someone who truly understood you. But then something changed. Slowly, quietly, almost invisibly. You began to feel tired, drained. Your confidence started to slip. You questioned your own instincts. The same connection that once felt so powerful now leaves you confused and unsure. And here's the hardest part to admit. You're not even sure what went wrong. They didn't yell. They didn't hit. But something in you began to disappear. This video is not about blame. It's not about labeling people as villains. And it's definitely not about encouraging you to become suspicious of everyone around you. What it is about is clarity, because sometimes people enter our lives carrying wounds of their own, emotional blind spots, patterns they don't even see, and those patterns can hurt us, even if they never meant to. Not every harmful relationship comes wrapped in obvious red flags. Some look like kindness at first. Some feel like home until they don't. And the truth is, not every unhealthy relationship is about abuse or malice. Sometimes it's about emotional mismatch. Sometimes it's about boundaries that were never set or never respected. And sometimes it's about a quiet erosion of your peace that takes months or years to notice. That's why today I want to walk with you through 6 emotional warning signs, not to judge the people around you, but to help you better protect the person within you. Because your peace matters, your energy matters, and yes, you matter. So if any part of this feels familiar, I invite you to lean in, not with fear, but with curiosity, not with anger, but with compassion, both for yourself and maybe even for the person you're thinking of right now. Because recognizing a pattern doesn't mean writing someone off. It means choosing to see clearly, and seeing clearly is what allows you to choose wisely. Now, before we get into these 6 signs, I want to make something very clear. This is not about diagnosing anyone. This is not about labeling someone as a narcissist, a victim, a psychopath, or a monster. We live in a world that's too quick to throw people into boxes and too slow to ask why those boxes exist in the first place. But just because we don't point fingers doesn't mean we ignore the signs. You can be kind and discerning. You can be compassionate and self-protective. In fact, that's what emotional maturity looks like. So think of this video as a flashlight, a way to bring light to the places you may have been taught to overlook, a way to reclaim parts of yourself that may have slowly been pushed aside. And here's the honest truth. Sometimes the people who cause the most harm don't even realize they're doing it. Maybe they've never been taught how to connect without controlling. Maybe they've been rewarded their whole lives for charm and performance, not depth and integrity. Or maybe they've been hurt so badly themselves. They don't know how to love without wounding others in the process. And while that may be tragic, it's not your responsibility to fix it. Your job is to recognize how you feel around them, to ask the hard questions. Am I thriving in this connection or shrinking? Do I feel emotionally safe or constantly unsettled? Do I trust this person with my heart, or am I constantly managing their moods to protect mine? These are not easy questions, but they're necessary ones. Because emotional clarity isn't found in dramatic outbursts or obvious betrayals. It's often found in the quiet, subtle shifts, the energy that changes when you speak up, the tension you feel when you try to say no, the way your body responds when you hear their footsteps, see their name, or try to explain yourself for the 10th time. So if you've been ignoring that uneasy feeling, this might be your invitation to stop, to pause, to listen to yourself more deeply than you have in a while, to understand that you're not crazy, you're not too sensitive, you're responding to something real, even if the other person refuses to see it. So in the next part of this video, we'll explore 6 subtle but powerful signs that you may be in an emotionally unhealthy dynamic. Not to judge, not to accuse, but to give you the clarity you need to come back to yourself. Because at the end of the day, you deserve relationships where you don't have to shrink to stay. You deserve conversations that don't leave you questioning your worth. And you deserve peace, not just when you're alone, but in the presence of others. Let's begin. Let's talk about a type of exhaustion that doesn't come from physical work, but from emotional weight. Have you ever had someone in your life whose world always seems to be in chaos? A new crisis every week, a job that just didn't work out, a falling out with yet another friend, family member, or ex. And every time you listen, you notice a pattern. None of it is ever their fault. It's always someone else. The boss was unfair. Their ex was controlling. Their friend was jealous. The timing wasn't right. The universe was against them. At first, you feel empathy. You listen. You support. You even admire how they bounce back, how passionate they are about starting over. You want to believe in their story, but slowly, that empathy turns into confusion, then exhaustion, and eventually you start feeling like you're carrying their life for them. You find yourself constantly cleaning up the emotional messes, apologizing on their behalf, making excuses to others, maybe even funding their latest restart because they're so close this time. And all the while, there's very little reflection coming from them. No real accountability, no pause to ask, what part did I play in this? Just movement, fast, dramatic, and messy. Here's what's important to understand. Not all impulsive or chaotic behavior comes from a bad place. Some people are running from wounds they've never had the tools to heal. They were never taught how to pause, how to take ownership, how to build slowly instead of chase quickly. But here's what Stoic wisdom reminds us. Compassion does not mean self-sacrifice. You can care about someone deeply and still recognize when their lack of stability is becoming your burden to bear. And it's not always loud either. Sometimes it's subtle. They might be incredibly charming, visionary even. They talk big, dream big. But when it comes to follow through, you're the one doing most of the heavy lifting. Let me give you an example. Jason is the kind of guy who lights up the room with ideas. He's got plans, passion, purpose, at least on the surface. But every project falls apart within months. He blames his team, the market, the system. He borrows money but doesn't repay it. Crashes on your couch but never contributes. Says he'll change, but when held accountable, he vanishes or explodes. What you're dealing with isn't just poor planning. It's a refusal to own consequences. And in many cases, it's so deeply ingrained, they don't even see it as a problem. And here's the kicker. People like this often expect forgiveness. They believe that because they mean well, the damage they cause shouldn't count. But it does count. To you it counts. You're left burned out, confused, and questioning if maybe you're just too rigid. You're not. You're trying to live in reality, and they're asking you to live in their fantasy. So what do? You ground yourself in what you can control. You recognize the difference between support and rescue. You remind yourself that being there for someone doesn't mean carrying their consequences. That's not love. That's enabling. The Stoics taught us that responsibility is freedom. When you take full ownership of your life, your choices, your reactions, your impact, you gain power. But when someone constantly avoids that ownership, they trap themselves in a cycle. And if you're not careful, they trap you with them. The most compassionate thing you can do in this situation: stop cushioning the fall. Let reality do what it does best. Teach, not with cruelty, but with clarity. You don't have to slam the door. You don't have to shout, argue, or accuse, but you do have to stop pretending it's okay. Because it's not. It's not okay that you feel like a life raft for someone who refuses to swim. It's not okay that your peace keeps getting shattered by their storms. It's not okay that you're doing the emotional labor for two people. Your energy is not a bottomless resource. Your presence is not a rescue mission. Your love is not a substitute for personal growth. So ask yourself, am I helping or am I enabling? Am I loving or am I rescuing? Am I supporting a person or protecting them from the truth they need to face? These questions aren't easy, but they matter because emotional health isn't just about how we feel. It's about how we take responsibility for the way we make others feel too. And when someone refuses that responsibility over and over again, the kindest thing you can do is let go. Let me paint a picture for you. You meet someone new, and almost instantly, everything feels different. They remember the smallest details. They text good morning, good night, and everything in between. They ask deep questions, say all the right things, and within just a few days, they're already talking about your future together. At first, it feels incredible, like something out of a movie. Like maybe, just maybe, you've finally found that one person who gets you. But then something shifts. One day you set a boundary. Maybe you take longer to reply. Maybe you say not tonight or gently push back on something they said. And suddenly, the warmth is gone. They go quiet, distant, cold. You're left replaying everything, wondering what you did wrong. You start asking yourself, did I mess this up? Was I too much or not enough? Here's the truth. This is not necessarily the behavior of a bad person, but it is a red flag because what you're experiencing might not be real intimacy. It could be intensity, and that difference matters more than most people realize. Real connection, honest, healthy, emotionally grounded connection takes time. It builds slowly. It weaves through moments of shared trust, challenge, laughter, even silence. But emotional intensity that escalates too fast, that's often a signal that something deeper might be off. Sometimes this kind of person isn't falling for you. They're falling for the idea of you, and they're moving fast because speed is how they stay in control of the narrative. Let me explain. When someone rushes intimacy, talking about love within days, making grand gestures, mirroring everything you say, showing up as your perfect match, it can feel magical. But what's actually happening may be far more calculated, even if it's unconscious. It's not necessarily about connection. It's about creating an emotional high so powerful you don't notice the warning signs underneath. You might hear phrases like, "You're everything I've ever wanted. I've never felt this way about anyone before. It's like we were made for each other." And sure, sometimes lightning does strike, but often when love comes too easily, too fast, and too perfectly, it's not love. It's projection. It's someone painting their fantasy onto you. And the moment you break character by having your own thoughts, needs, or boundaries, the spell begins to break. And here's what's important to recognize. That emotional coldness you feel after setting a boundary, that's not your fault. That's not because you did something wrong. It's because your boundary disrupted the image they were building, not just of you, but of themselves in the relationship. You're no longer a perfect mirror. You're a real person. And that's where things get complicated. Here's a simple but powerful question to ask yourself in situations like this. Am I being seen or am I being studied? Am I being loved or idealized? Is this connection deepening or just accelerating? When something feels too good to be true, it's not always because there's a monster hiding underneath, but it could mean that the foundation is being built on illusion, not reality. And here's where Stoic wisdom becomes so helpful. The Stoics teach us to remain grounded in truth, not fantasy, to be steady in ourselves even when others try to pull us into emotional whirlwinds, to value connection that grows from understanding, not urgency. So if you're feeling overwhelmed by someone's attention, if the connection feels like it's skipping steps, fast forwarding through trust, and diving straight into intensity, pause. Ask yourself, do I feel free in this connection or managed? Am I breathing or holding my breath? Do I feel more like self or less? True love doesn't rush. It doesn't need to, because it knows that time will only deepen what's real. So the next time someone sweeps you off your feet, don't be afraid to slow down. Not because you don't care, but because you do. And because the right person won't mind taking their time to truly know you. They won't fear your boundaries. They won't disappear the moment you act like a whole, complex, real human being. They'll stay. Not for the fantasy, but for you. Have you ever opened up to someone, really opened up, and been met with silence or worse, a response that felt cold, clinical, or completely disconnected? You talk about something that hurt you deeply, and instead of warmth or presence, you get a logical solution, a just do this kind of answer, almost like your pain was a puzzle they were trying to solve. And for a moment, you question yourself. Am I asking for too much? Am I being too emotional? But here's the thing. You're not asking for a fix. You're asking to be felt. And that's a need we all have. To be understood not just with words or analysis, but with heart. This is what empathy is. It's that invisible bridge that allows someone to sit with you in your experience, not to change it, not to judge it, just to be there fully. So what happens when that bridge isn't there? You start to feel alone, even in conversation, even in love. You could be pouring your soul out and they're staring at you like they're watching a scene in a movie. They know what emotion they're supposed to display, but something's missing. It feels flat, off, almost hollow. That's when you begin to realize they might see what you're feeling, but they don't actually feel it with you. And that difference changes everything. Now, let's be clear. This doesn't always mean someone is heartless. Sometimes it's a defense mechanism. Some people grew up in environments where emotions were unsafe. They learned to disconnect, to intellectualize, to function rather than feel. And now, as adults, they carry that same emotional armor into their relationships. But here's the problem. When you're trying to build a meaningful connection with someone who is emotionally shut down, you end up doing all the emotional work for two people. You cry, they blink. You share, they analyze. You reach out, they redirect. Over time, you begin shrinking your expression, not because you feel less, but because you're tired of feeling alone with someone. You tell yourself, maybe I'm just too sensitive, when in reality, you're just asking for something very human: connection. So how do you know when this is happening? You might notice they avoid emotional moments. They shut down or change the subject when things get vulnerable. Or they offer advice that sounds right, but lands like it came from a script. You might even feel like your deepest moments are being stored, not held, as if your vulnerability isn't sacred, but something to be remembered and possibly used later. That's not empathy. That's emotional distance disguised as attentiveness. And that's why this sign matters so much. Because without emotional connection, a relationship becomes something functional, not fulfilling. Like a machine that operates but never warms. It doesn't mean you need to cut ties, but it does mean you need clarity. You need to understand, am I sharing with someone who can meet me in this space? Or am I giving pieces of my soul to someone who doesn't know what to do with them? Stoic wisdom reminds us to see reality for what it is, not what we wish it were. And sometimes reality is this: someone you love may not know how to hold space for your feelings, not because they don't care, but because they never learned how. But their lack of capacity does not make your needs a burden. It doesn't mean you're wrong for craving depth, presence, or tenderness. So don't minimize what you feel. Don't twist yourself into someone more manageable. Don't wait around hoping one day they'll understand if they're showing you repeatedly that they don't. Protect your emotional truth. You're not too much. You're just asking for a type of love that includes listening with the heart. So ask yourself, when I'm vulnerable, do I feel safer or smaller? When I speak from the heart, do I feel met or misunderstood? Do I leave conversations feeling held or emptied? These answers matter, not because they condemn the other person, but because they clarify what you need to feel whole. Because love without empathy may still look like love, but it doesn't feel like it. And you deserve more than a performance of connection. You deserve the real thing. Let's talk about something many of us don't see coming, because it doesn't look like manipulation. It looks like love, like helping, like being a good person. It starts small. They need a place to crash just for a few nights. They forgot their wallet. Can you spot them? Just this once, they're in a tight spot, just a temporary loan until things settle. And you care, you're kind, you want to help. Because that's what we do in relationships, right? We show up, we support, we give. But over time, going, something shifts. That couch becomes a permanent bed. That emergency loan is never mentioned again. That shared account quietly becomes their safety net. And somewhere along the way, without realizing it, you've become someone's backup plan, their emotional, financial, or logistical lifeline. Not because they asked directly, but because they've figured out how to make you offer. This is what subtle exploitation looks like. Not with demands, but with stories, with ceremonies, with "I didn't want to ask, but..." It doesn't feel like being used, at least not at first. It feels like intimacy. It feels like partnership, like we're in this together, until you realize you're the only one actually carrying the weight. Now, let me be clear. There's nothing wrong with helping someone you care about. We all go through rough seasons. We all need support sometimes. But there's a difference between support and supply, between someone who leans on you while rebuilding their strength and someone who never intends to stand on their own. And you'll start to notice the pattern. There's always a reason, always an excuse, always a new crisis, and somehow always you cleaning it up. You begin to feel drained but guilty for feeling that way. Because they're not a bad person, and you're not the type to walk away when someone's struggling. But what if their struggle is a cycle they're choosing to repeat? Because they've learned it gets their needs met. What if their hardship is real, but their growth is optional? That's the hard truth about emotional freeloading. It doesn't require malice, just comfort. If someone realizes they can get their needs met without effort or accountability, why would they change? And more importantly, why should you keep paying for it? Here's a helpful metaphor. Imagine your life is a well. Every time you support someone, you draw water and offer it. But if that person keeps coming back with bigger buckets and never once helps refill the well, eventually you run dry. And you're not bitter because you gave. You're bitter because they never even asked how much you had left to give. So how do you know when this is happening? Watch for one-sided patterns. Do they always need but rarely give? Do they present every ask as mutual, like it's for both of you, but the benefit always skews in their favor? Are you helping because you want to, or because you feel obligated to? Here's where Stoic wisdom comes in. True generosity is grounded in self-respect. Epictetus said, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." And that includes the people around you. You cannot give endlessly to someone whose appetite is bottomless. You cannot fix a hole in someone else's soul by pouring out your own. So what can you do? First, get honest. Name what's happening, not out of blame, but out of clarity. You're not cruel for noticing a pattern of taking. You're not heartless for drawing a boundary. You're not selfish for asking, what am I getting in return? Healthy relationships are reciprocal, not 50-50 every day, but a natural rhythm of giving and receiving. And when that rhythm breaks, when all the giving comes from one side, the connection becomes a transaction. And you are not a bank. You are not a silent investor in someone else's comfort. So ask yourself, do I feel consistently depleted in this relationship? Do I feel like I'm solving their life while mine stands still? If I stopped giving, would anything remain? These questions aren't cold, they're necessary, because you can be kind without being a doormat. You can love someone without letting them drain you. Support is sacred, but only when it flows both ways. And if it doesn't, you have every right to close the faucet, not because you've stopped caring, but because you've started caring about yourself. Let's talk about something subtle, but deeply damaging. Something that doesn't leave bruises, but leaves you questioning your memory, your sanity, and your sense of reality. It starts small. They say something hurtful. You bring it up later, and they swear it never happened. They make a promise, then deny ever saying those words when it's time to follow through. At first, you wonder if you misunderstood. You replay the moment in your mind. You even scroll through your texts just to double check. But they're calm, confident. They tell you that you're overreacting, that you always twist things, that you just don't remember it right. And that's when something begins to unravel inside you. You stop trusting your memory. You second guess your reactions. You start keeping things to yourself, not because you're at peace, but because you're afraid you'll be made to feel crazy for simply remembering what happened. This tactic has a name. It's called gaslighting, and it's one of the most dangerous forms of emotional manipulation because it doesn't just distort facts, it erodes your reality. Gaslighting works not by shouting, but by subtly shifting the ground beneath you. So gradually you begin to feel unsure of everything, your instincts, your boundaries, even your truth. Let me give you an example. You remember a specific conversation, clearly, word for word. But when you bring it up, they deny it completely. Then somehow you end up apologizing for misunderstanding. They're not raising their voice. They're not calling you names. They're just planting doubt. And they do it so calmly, so rationally, that it makes you question everything. That's the power of psychological manipulation. It doesn't need to be loud to be loud. It works best in silence. In the private war, they start inside your own mind. And here's the hardest part. You begin to feel like you're the problem. You try harder to communicate better. You keep notes. You soften your tone. You shrink your truth to fit their version of the story. But no matter how carefully you try to present your side, you're always met with a wall. A wall that shifts, that confuses, that blames. That's not communication, that's control. And it's exhausting. Now, not all disagreements are gaslighting. People forget. People remember things differently. That's human. But if someone consistently rewrites reality when it doesn't benefit them, if they use your confusion as a weapon, if they make you feel too emotional every time you express a need, then you're not having a miscommunication. You're being manipulated. So what can you do? You don't need to win the argument. You don't need to prove every word. What you do need is clarity, your clarity. Start writing things down, not to use against them, but to anchor yourself in the truth. Keep a journal of conversations, promises, key moments. That journal becomes a lighthouse when the fog starts rolling in. Talk to people you trust, people outside of the dynamic. Let them reflect back what you might be too deep inside to see clearly. Most importantly, don't abandon your inner knowing. You're not weak. You're not dramatic. You're not imagining things. You're responding to a pattern designed to wear you down, quietly, steadily, and with ever's taking responsibility. The Stoics teach us something powerful here. That peace comes not from controlling others, but from protecting our own minds. You don't have to convince them. You don't have to explain yourself 100 different ways. You just have to stay rooted in what you know to be true. Because when you protect your clarity, you reclaim your strength. And that's what manipulation fears most. A person who sees it, but no longer lets it in. So if you're feeling lost in a relationship where truth keeps shifting, where apologies never come and questions are met with blame, you're not alone. And you're not imagining it. You're waking up. And that is where healing begins. There's a kind of betrayal that cuts deeper than most, not because it's loud or cruel or obvious, but because it's quiet, because it happens in a place that was supposed to feel safe. Let's talk about it. You're in a relationship, maybe romantic, maybe a friendship, maybe even family. You start to open up. You share the hard things, your childhood, your shame, that one moment you still carry in silence. And it feels healing. Like maybe finally you found someone who sees you, who accepts the whole version of you, not just the polished parts. But then one day in the middle of an argument, they throw it back at you. That thing you told them in trust becomes ammunition. A quiet truth you shared while feeling vulnerable, now repackaged as an insult, a dig, a guilt trip. You're stunned. You try to brush it off, but it happens again and again. Not always directly. Sometimes it's a joke. Sometimes it's a low blow followed by You're too sensitive. But the message is clear. I know where your shift is, and I'm not afraid to use it. This is emotional weaponization. And it's not just hurtful, it's a violation because in a healthy connection, vulnerability should never be turned into a target. Let me ask you this. Have you ever left a conversation feeling smaller than when it began? Like your past was used not to understand you, but to control you? That's not love. That's not care. That's someone exploiting access they were never meant to abuse. A truly kind person does not use your pain as a tool. They don't file away your struggles for future fights. They don't turn your openness into leverage. And here's the deeper truth. The smarter someone is, the more capable they are of doing real harm with their words, which means the more important it is for them to practice restraint, empathy, and compassion. Because intelligence without compassion is cruelty in disguise. Now, some people do this without even realizing it. They've grown up in homes where emotional manipulation was the norm, where winning an argument mattered more than being fair, where silence was punished and vulnerability was a trap. But that doesn't make it okay. Your story, your pain, is not a weapon to be used against you. And anyone who treats it that way is showing you something very important, that the space you thought was safe might not be. And that's a hard thing to admit. Because you want to believe that the people closest to you have your best interest at heart. You want to believe that the person you trusted isn't trying to hurt you, especially not like this. But here's a gentle truth. Intentions matter, but impact matters more. If someone continues to use your vulnerability as a tool of control, you have every right to question the foundation of that relationship. Not out of bitterness, but out of self-protection. So what can you do? Start by noticing the pattern. How do they speak to you when they're upset? Do they bring up your past not to understand you, but to shame you? Do they joke about things that clearly cut deep? And more importantly, how do you feel around them? Do you feel safe sharing? Or do you find yourself censoring, shrinking, protecting your truth like a secret? Here's what the Stoics might remind us. Trust is sacred, and once broken, it's not easily rebuilt. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike the one who caused you harm." You don't have to retaliate. You don't have to explain yourself again and again. You just have to remember this. You are allowed to create emotional boundaries. You are allowed to protect the parts of you that are still healing. You are allowed to say, "This isn't safe for me." Because real intimacy doesn't hurt you with your own truth. It holds it gently. It honors it. It knows your pain and chooses not to make it worse. So if someone consistently uses your past to control your present, you don't need a bigger heart. You need a stronger line. That's not cold. That's clarity. And clarity is the first step to freedom. Let's take a breath together, because everything we've explored today isn't about labeling people as bad or cutting everyone out of your life. It's about something much deeper. Recognizing what is safe, what is healthy, and what is quietly draining your spirit. The truth is, no one gets through life without wounds. Every person you meet carries some kind of pain, and sometimes that pain leaks into how they relate to others, how they love, how they argue, how they show up in relationships. But just because someone is hurting doesn't mean it's your job to be their shelter at the cost of your own peace. You are allowed to have boundaries. You are allowed to say, "This doesn't feel right," even if the other person didn't mean harm, even if they've had a hard life, even if you love them. Stoicism doesn't ask us to be cold. It asks us to be clear, to choose our responses instead of reacting from guilt, fear, or obligation. It teaches us to protect what we can control, our minds, our values, our peace. You're not here to save anyone. You're here to walk your path with strength and compassion, including compassion for yourself. So if a relationship consistently leaves you confused, anxious, drained, or doubting yourself, it's okay to pause, to step back, to ask yourself with honesty, am I still growing here or just surviving? Sometimes we stay because we hope. Sometimes because we're afraid of being alone. Sometimes because we don't want to give up on someone. But here's the thing, letting go isn't giving up. It's choosing to live in truth, not in cycles of confusion. You can love someone and still create space. You can understand someone's pain and still say, I'm not okay with this. That's not selfish. That's wisdom. And if you've seen pieces of yourself in this video, if you've thought maybe that's what I've been feeling but couldn't name, then take that as a sign that your clarity is returning, that you are not crazy, not overly sensitive, not imagining things. You're waking up. You're learning to trust your own sense of safety. And that right there is powerful. Because when you begin to honor your own intuition, when you stop explaining away the red flags, when you start choosing peace over chaos, you begin to rebuild something sacred. Your self-respect. You deserve to feel seen, supported, and safe. Not just sometimes, but consistently. And no matter where you are on your healing journey, please remember this. You are not alone. There are people who've walked through confusion and come out stronger. There are safe relationships waiting for you, ones built on mutual care, truth, and growth. And there is still time, always time, to come home to yourself. So if this video helped you put words to something you've been carrying, if it made you pause and think, I deserve better, then don't let this be the end of that thought. Let it be the beginning of something new. If this message spoke to you, if it helped you feel seen or understood, please like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because we're building a space for clarity, healing, and quiet strength, and this is only the beginning. Thank you for being here. You are not broken, you are becoming.